Afternoon or good morning rather, and welcome to confrontation and managing it when you're not particularly great at confrontation. And let's face it, I think most of us are not particularly great at it. My name's Dante St James. I'm going to be taking you through a little bit about confrontation, some personal examples you'll hear from when I've done some confrontation myself, but more importantly, also some times when I've seen other confrontation go right, wrong, or not quite the right way that I think that they thought it was going to go. Let's get it started. A bit of an unknown quote here that I picked up online. I really liked it when I saw it, that if you expect the world to be fair with you because you are fair, you are fooling yourself. That's like expecting the lion not to eat you because you didn't eat him. That's a very, very big statement to be making, I suppose, when you look at it to go with confrontation, because quite often we think of, well, if nothing will go wrong if I don't do the confrontation, but then the confrontation will come to you anyway. And I guess that's the message we'll get away with today is that there is going to be confrontation regardless of whether you like it or not. There's going to be conflicts whether you like them or not. It's a matter of how you prepare for them and making sure that you're in the right space for those confrontations to go on. In this particular webinar, we're going to be looking at why we have a fear of confrontation, how we can approach the overcoming of the fear of confrontation, very, very importantly, preparing for some constructive confrontation, and when at the end of the day, is it a really good idea to just not do the confrontation? Because there's sometimes when confrontation may actually make a matter worse. This is brought to you by Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program. It's an initiative of the Australian Government together with Business Station in Western Australia, Regional Development Australia in Brisbane, and Treaty Business Consulting in the Northern Territory. Starting off with a bit of my background, having done some work with my own business, Clickstarter, and a couple of other businesses I run as well. I've also got a contract with the Australian Government to have the New Business Assistance with NEASE program in the Northern Territory. I work with Google's Digital Springboard program, Treaty Business Consulting in Darwin, Facebook's Boost program across Australia, and with my own training business, DanteStJames.com. So why do we actually fear confrontation? What is it about having some authentic conversations with other people that we feel is just so terrifying and hard to overcome? Well, first of all, you've got to understand that preparation and calm is the approach you should be taking to all confrontation. The core of handling confrontation comes with these two main principles. If you're prepared, with all the right information you need, and you're calm in your approach, you're not going into it like you want to tear someone in a new hole. You're just going, why are we still afraid of confrontation? Because if we've got those two things in place, it seems logical that confrontation should be fairly easy to go about. But we all know in the real world, that is definitely not the case. The 6 reasons we're afraid come down to our upbringing, a fear of failure, a fear of not looking good in front of other people. We want to look good. We want to be liked, in other words. Going up against the crowd. Also, not understanding whether we're prepared enough in our arguments. And also the fact that we tend to speak without listening. And a lot of us do that. We are more concerned with getting our message out than listening to the messages that are coming back into us. So let's look at your upbringing first. It could be down to physical abuse, or it could be down to verbal abuse, lack of safety to express an opinion, and what we call risk-averse parents. Now, when it comes to your upbringing, some examples would have in there the child who was taught to be the diplomat. So the child who was definitely taught not to argue, not to talk back, not to fight, not to the kind of child who was taught, I guess, to share everything and never ever stake claim on anything. The diplomat is always looking for the most peaceful outcome, often to the detriment of whoever the diplomat is representing. So in our case, it could be you're representing yourself. You're a kid who has a toy, and then another kid wants to play with that toy, and you're being told by society that you should share your toys. But the reality of the business world is sharing your toys will often get you out of business. So sometimes being trained as a diplomat is not really a good example for being trained for business. There's what we call the diligent worker, who comes a lot from this. So they were very much taught to sit down, shut up, children seen, not heard, that kind of thing. A lot of that thing where children not allowed to express themselves and allowed to express an opinion, even if it's completely wrong. And so these people go on to become what we call very diligent workers. They're people who sit in their cubicles in an office. You never hear from them. You never get a problem with them. But you also never particularly get anything great out of them. They're very much, they turn up, they come in for a paycheck, and they're not really there to do much more than that. And so when confrontation comes your way and you're that diligent worker who's been sort of pushed into a management position, you can feel very, very uncomfortable about having to be someone who's initiating some kind of confrontation with someone who's not doing the right thing. And then we have the unseen hero. This is the person who kind of takes pride in the fact that they do some great work, some amazing things. They may even do some amazing work in business, but they don't want the attention. And the not wanting the attention doesn't come from a noble place of them saying, I just want to do good work and let the work speak for itself. These are people who don't want to do the work because they don't want people to know it's them, because then nobody can come to them when there's a problem. And it's a way of sort of covering up a fear of confrontation by trying to act as though you're very noble and very selfless. And it's like, oh yes, it's just all part of my job, that kind of thing. So these examples are the kind of people, I suppose, which have learned along the way that it's easier to just get away with not taking credit for things, for not taking their head above the parapet, and not rocking the boat, I think, is a great example of the term we have. So those kind of people, the ones that weren't allowed to speak up as kids, weren't allowed generally to have they might have been abused as kids, so were most likely emotionally and verbally abused, who were just basically put in that position where kids are to be seen and not heard, and if it's entirely possible, not to be seen either. Now, the fear of failure comes from not so much the failure itself, but it's being seen as a failure and being wrong in front of other people. So when you actually fail that thing, you hide it so much that you can't possibly see any way that people would ever respect you again. And there's also the eternal shame that you'll carry with yourself as someone who's wrong. So a fear of confrontation honestly comes from a fear of being, well, wait a minute, even though I'm going in there with all the right stuff, I'm going in there really prepared, what if I'm wrong? And what if I fail to actually get the result out of this confrontation that I'm looking to get out of this confrontation? This is where someone is very afraid of being shown to be weak, shown to be wrong, shown to be flexible when they actually want to be shown, when they actually want to present themselves as being very inflexible. So a fear of failure then is a fear of confrontation, not because you're afraid of the confrontation yourself, but you're afraid of the outcome of the confrontation. So you're actually not really scared of the actual process. You're scared of the fact that you might not get what you want out of it, and therefore others will see you as a bit of a failure. So an example for these could be the high achiever. So this is the manager or the business owner who's always done really, really well. They've won awards. They're always being told how great they are by everybody. And when confrontation comes, they're not used to people confronting them because they're always a hero. They're always quite conspicuous, like the visible hero I'm talking about down here. They're very conspicuous in the work they do. Some would say less like what I do. I do a very public kind of expression of my work. And so when it comes down to having confrontation, it could be expected that maybe I would actually fear that confrontation because I don't want people to see me as anything but the high achiever, the smart person, the hero who works too hard and too long hours and does all these different things. So that's not necessarily, again, none of these, the high achiever, the genius, and the visible hero, are scared of failure within themselves. They're mostly scared of failure because of what it makes them look like, not the high achiever, not such a genius, and not such a hero after all. Not being liked is a very strong motivator for a fear of confrontation and many other areas of life as well. Wow, overcoming this one took a lot of work for me, and some say that I probably still got a way to go because I still do such public work. So it's where you don't want to have confrontation specifically with someone who you it's important for you that they like you. So there could be someone who you work with who's a friend, who's an old colleague, who's someone you've known for a very long time, even a family member. Wow, if you've ever done business with family, that's something which you learn very quickly, is that you very quickly learn how to separate, the family member as a person and the family member as a part of your business. A lot of the time, it's afraid that you'll also, through this confrontation, cause other people not to like you. So a fear of confrontation can just come down to the fact that you're afraid that people won't like you because you need to confront them in the first place. And that is debilitating and crippling when it comes to running a business, especially at the point where you start using contractors, suppliers, employers, strategic partners, funding bodies, all those kind of things that you have to have interaction with others. Means that you honestly want to be liked, and for very good reasons. Obviously, you want to be liked because it helps grease the wheels of commerce. It helps things keep moving along. But at the same time, that fear can be absolutely debilitating and stop you from moving forward at all when you're so afraid that your actions of confronting a supplier or an employee may cause that person or other people not to like you. So examples of this would be the business owner who's everyone's friend. So this is the business owner who has always been so friendly. Everyone says such lovely things about her or him. They're always the person who is referred to very, very easily. Oh, yes, he knows how to do all that. Oh, yeah, definitely go to her. She's the best. The problem with everyone's friend is that eventually they have to become someone who says no. And when someone's so used to saying yes and people are very used to them saying yes, then for them to suddenly become the person who is saying no, or the person who is saying, no, I've got enough work now, or I've already made my decision, they suddenly become not so much a friend because, a friend's supposed to always say yes, right? That's because I guess that quite often we've got very unhealthy expectations of what a friend is. So someone who's afraid of confrontation in this example will be what we call the walkover. This is the person who, for it's so important for them to be liked that they are just completely ineffective in their role or completely ineffective in running their business because people just walk all over them. So let's just say it's a graphic designer who she's so it's so important to her to be liked and for people to like her that she constantly just designs things, gives them away for free, donating things all the time, letting people beat her down on price because she just doesn't want people to dislike her. She wants to have her work out there and she wants people to say nice things about her. The trouble is, though, that when she's giving away so much at a low price or for free, she's not making money and is unable to support her business. So she becomes a walkover to the detriment of her actual business. And then there's the admired. The admired person, he's the guy who everyone looks at because they're also called yesterday's hero. There's someone everyone likes because they're supposed to like this person who achieved such amazing things at one stage, and everyone likes them and everyone respects them and looks up to them. The trouble is, though, that they've been riding off that one win for a very, very long time. This one piece of good work they did, they've just been, riding off that little piece of work or that one great achievement they made for such a long time. So when they finally have to go, okay, I can't just be, the popular guy on stage in front of everyone that everyone likes because he did this one good piece of work, and I actually have to confront someone, then suddenly everyone's like, oh, he's not as nice as what we thought we were. Oh, I would have expected more of that of an Olympic medalist, or I would have expected more of that as someone who owns such a great business. So when that happens, the fear of confrontation just could be just simply that you enjoy being admired and you're afraid that now you won't be. You can also have and this is a very legitimate, I think, fear of confrontation when you're outnumbered, because if it's just you going up against a whole lot of people who are all accusing you of this one thing or all going to task, taking you to task, or if it's a case of you have to confront a very large group of your employees, if you've got some, or it might be all of your suppliers. So your suppliers are all just really, really slack at the moment and they tend to work together very, very clearly. Then you have to go up to them. That can be very, very intimidating. Think about the person who's building a house. They have to, things aren't moving the way they should be. So they have to confront someone. So they confront the project manager. who who's very, very close with the plumbing contractor, the carpentry contractor, the concreter, the tiler, the decorator, the roofer, the everybody there. They're all really close. They're used to working together. So it's like when you go up against one, you're going up against all of them. And that can be very, very intimidating, because physically, when there's a great big wall of people in front of you that you have to confront, that can be quite formidable to go up against. So in these cases, you might look at someone who is the different thinker. Let's just say if that person that you're having the confrontation with, they're a little bit different. They're someone who just thinks about life a little bit differently. They might have very, very vastly different politics to what you and the majority do have. They might have something where it's, I guess they have a vastly different approach to the kind of work you're doing than the work they're actually doing. And this different thinker may be gaining some popularity in your business, or in the supply chain. If they're a supplier to you, they're also gaining a lot of popularity in people who they're also supplying to. So when you go up against them, you're actually going up against a tide of public opinion about that person. So the different thinker may not be right, because they're different. Just different doesn't always mean right. Different sometimes can mean actually different for no reason apart from it's just a contrarian view or a conspiracy theory. The idealist is this kind of person as well. So if you're going up against the idealist who is able to communicate their ideals very effectively to other people, so that when you're going to confront this person, you're essentially confronting an attitude that's gone across a lot of people, then you can feel very, very right, I guess, in feeling a little intimidated by that. And then if you're something of a loner, if you're someone who is a business owner, you're a bit of a loner, you try to avoid social contact mostly with other business owners and with even the people who supply to you or who your customers are, then confronting someone about paying a bill, confronting someone about paying an invoice, about not supplying components to your business on time can feel a little scary, because you've just out of practice with dealing with other humans. So that can be a very legitimate thing, that you're afraid to confront people because you're not really actually sure how you even communicate normally with people, because you're a little bit out of practice with that kind of thing. Then there's where you're not confident at all. And when you're not confident, it's more about you're not being confident with your ability to communicate your point clearly. You may have the right, what you feel is the right opinion. You feel like you're coming in at the right side of history on this particular confrontation. But the problem is, though, that you're not someone who's used to speaking out loud. You're not someone who's used to getting up in front of people or having heart-to-hearts or one-to-ones with people. You're used to working with people who are just great to work with, and they're always doing the right thing. And all of a sudden you're confronted with this one person that you need to deal with who's not towing the line. They could be, again, a supplier. They could be a software developer, a web developer, a graphic designer that you're working with. It could be even somebody who is a business partner. When you're not confident about your ability to communicate your point clearly, you have a legitimate fear that this confrontation is not going to go right. And if you can't communicate your point clearly, then someone will misunderstand you, and that could descend into arguments, into, potential dangerous situations, which most of the time it doesn't. Like, clearly, dangerous confrontations when it comes to business are very, very microscopically rare. But there's a legitimate fear that we think if we don't communicate this properly to someone who may be quite aggressive in their stance, they might be quite assertive, and that you're not particularly aggressive or assertive, that you might feel like you'll be walked all over. So these kind of examples would be where you're the introvert. So you're someone who is not really that, massively driven to prepare a lot of your speech to people, because you avoid social situations, you avoid confrontational situations, you avoid having to have arguments, because you might find that having peace is much more effective in your life than being right. That quite often in business is then just an excuse you use to never have to actually confront anything. There's what we call the backgrounder. So that's the boss or the business owner who really just likes to sit in the background. They're a bit of a wallflower. Whilst they are running a business, they often delegate a lot of the responsibility for the operations of the business to other people, to the point where sometimes some of those people are feeling a little bit too empowered to make decisions and to make moves that are actually detrimental to your business. This is where you need to remind yourself that you may be a backgrounder. You may not like being the face of what you do. You still own this ship, and captain, you still need to steer this ship. So if someone else is steering it for you, then you have to ask the question, are they steering it because I'm too scared to, and it's more important to me to be in the background, or are they steering it because they've just taken advantage of a situation and they're using this to bring some sort of glory to themselves whilst doing something that's actually not right and detrimental to the business? If it's going to bring your business down, you, the backgrounder, needs to come to the foreground. You also might be a very creative person. This happens a lot in arts-based businesses where you're particularly creative, but you think your business acumen is actually quite poor. It's very rare to find creatives who are very good business people as well. They often have to team up with those who can help to bring their creations out to the world, to promote them more thoroughly and to help them run an actual legitimate business out of that creative field. So if you're the creative, quite often what you'll do, you'll also be a bit of an introvert. Even though you might be an actor or a performer or a singer, quite often that's the act, that's your work, that's what you do, that's your passion, but it's not how you live. You actually live a very private life behind closed doors. So if you're the creative, quite often you'll be always looking for a very diplomatic, very creative solution to a confrontation, which often leads to you overthinking the confrontation and all of its possible things that could go wrong, and creating a whole field of things that could be terribly going wrong. So you never actually have to do the confrontation. You creatively dodge your way out of ever having to do that. Now, that's not all creative people. Some creative people are remarkably, ferocious when it comes to defending their work and defending their reputations. But a great deal of them are very introverted, but particularly creative and brilliant in what they do, but also know that they've got limitations on the things they can't. You also may be that kind of person who tends to speak before you have listened. This is a common problem in conversations with friends, with family members, with colleagues, with other business owners, where we are not listening to a conversation in which we're having with someone else. All we're doing is waiting for them to shut up so we can say what we need to say. And a lot of confrontation can fall into this, where I've come in with my agenda, they've come in with their agenda, and both of us are, I guess, pretending to listen to the other person, but not really listening to them. We're just really just hearing it out to get to the point where you're like, yeah, but, and then you'll add your bit. So it's one of those very unfruitful situations where you're not going to get anywhere at all. You just will not get to any kind of conclusion because all you're doing is talking and not listening. And this is where you'll tend to be that person who tends to speak before you even, it's not always interrupting someone, it's not always not listening to them. Sometimes it's not giving yourself the chance to weigh up all the facts about what you've heard in somebody else's testimony or in someone else's speaking, or what they're in their points, is some gold that you can use to either further your own agenda or to better understand where that person's coming from. What may have been looking like aggressive behavior in the workplace may actually have been self-defense if you had listened to what the full story was. What may have been construed as tiredness at work may have actually been that this person has actually been allocated far too many shifts, but you didn't know about that. So when you take the time to listen, and I call it active listening, it's where you're not just listening, but you're letting the other person know that you're listening. It's often just going, okay, starting off a confrontational situation in a meeting may be as simple as, all right, I'd love to hear what you think about why you're in here today, and let you know why they think they're in there. They may have come in with a completely different idea of what they've been hauled in for. So if you hear that out, it can often give you some great context that helps you understand where they're coming from. Now, it doesn't mean that that's going to make you excuse any bad behavior that may have gone on. What it's designed to do is to help you to understand more about where they're coming from so that you can make better decisions moving forward within the context of the life that they live. So it could be there's personal factors influencing their behavior. There could be that there are productivity issues that are causing frustration, or it could be that they're not the problem, that the person who hands the work to them may be the person who's slack. And then you can only see the problem happening at that point, because that's when it becomes visible within your organization or your business, is when it hits that person sitting across the desk from you. So if you tend to be the sort of person who goes in with an agenda and says, I'm in here basically to get rid of this person, you may be missing a really good opportunity to learn more about a situation and a person to help get a better understanding of what actually is going on. Because the problem may be not that person, it could be something else completely altogether different. So examples of this is where you tend to be the inspirer. You're the inspirational person in the workplace. So you've always got the right words to say. You've always got a speech prepared in your mind. You've always got, you've got amazing, you've got a way with words. Some of us just have a way with words. And so because you're used to having a way with words and being able to inspire people into action by the things you say to them, then it can be very tempting not to listen to someone and not to give yourself the time to understand what they've said and to just say something automatically inspirational that actually makes you sound like a bit of a, to be honest, a bit of a Simon Sinek. I think Simon Sinek's I just don't have any time for the guy. I think he's quite uninspirational, to be quite honest. He just muddles around with words and makes it sound like it's wisdom, and it's just really him stealing other people's quotes and turning them into his own. So the inspirer is somebody who doesn't have any real answers for a situation, doesn't have any real potential solutions moving forward. They just tend to have catchphrases, and they tend to have, very wise sounding words to say, but nothing really to back that up. The professor, on the other hand, is very experienced and very qualified and very able to back up everything they're saying with examples and data and a very strong opinion. But what they do lack, and this is someone who is running a business who's very, very, very smart, very, very, very smart, who knows how to do everything in the business backwards and has done it for 30 years, and their way is the only way, and anything else is just poorly done and not the right way and all that, is that they tend to get very stuck. Now, a professor in a university tends to be very stuck at where they learned last, and they may not have learned anything or written any academic papers in 30 years. So their knowledge might be really, really very outdated. The same kind of thing can happen in a business where the professor tends to have all the answers because they've done all the work before, and you may have the same thing. You may have all the answers ready to go. So you're not really there to listen to someone else's opinion. You're not really there to listen to what someone else has to say. You're just ready to let them shut up so you can throw back your qualified 30 years of experience opinion, and not discounting your 30 years of experience, because it obviously has a lot of bearing on the success of what you're doing in your business. But if you're the professor who always has the right answers and you're not actually learning anything new as you're going along, then you're in a very dangerous position for your business, and a pretty useless position when it comes to confrontation, because you're not going with current data, you're not going with current information, you're going in with really what's just an opinion that could be quite outdated. And the intimidator is somebody who's not really there to achieve anything but to intimidate you into backing down. Or you could be the person who's just really there as a formality. And you see this a lot in corporate jobs and in government departments, where the person who's doing the confrontation is just not there to achieve anything but to beat that person back into their box. This person may have done something that had some initiative, and so they're being punished for it. So the intimidator is all about making the person at the other side of the table feel bad so that they will retreat. It's not actually helping them. It just causes resentment, and it just causes further problems down the track. And often those things are not very far down the track. If someone's being very easily intimidated by someone, it leaves that person open then to accuse of bullying and those sort of things. In corporate workplaces, it's a very real thing. In a small business like yours and mine, it's probably not quite as I guess, relevant, but at the same time, the same characteristics it takes to get out there, create a new business, to do something really amazing in the world and different apart from just getting another job, is the same kind of characteristics that go towards what we call corporate psychopaths. So they could be the people who are trying to, they're trying to bulldoze their way through life and through business. And we call those people, like Donald Trump, for instance, a perfect example of a corporate psychopath doing everything he can in his power to intimidate his way through the world to get what he wants, regardless of whether what he wants is good for his constituents or not. Now, that's all great. We understand now what intimidation is and why we might be feeling a bit of fear when it comes to some kind of confrontation. But overcoming your fear of confrontation is a whole other story. And this is where we get active on trying to do it. So to understand the beginning of overcoming confrontation, fear of confrontation, is to go, well, it all starts from being assertive, yes, but also kind. The whole point while you're in there is to overcome a problem and move on. And that means that, yes, you have to be a little bit assertive to arrange a meeting to be confrontational with someone. Yes, you have to be a little bit assertive to make sure you're getting a point across. But at the same time, you're not there to destroy someone. You're not there to remove someone necessarily, unless that's what you did go in with. You're there to be kind. This is not a war. It's not a fight. It's not a battle. And it probably isn't going to go as badly as you think it's going to go. It's probably going to go a lot smoother and go in a direction that's actually a bit easier to manage than others. Sometimes, and I've been confronted at various times in my career in the past, when I was confronted by someone, I had no idea that this was going on. So it was very important for me to know that, and it caused me to overcome where I was at. So let's start. There's a big problem when it comes to being a pushover. The pushover is like everyone's friend. We were looking at that before, that fear of people not liking you. The problem is though, when you're that, you become a pushover. You become someone who's just like, yeah, get out of my way. And when you're someone who's a business owner, who's a pushover, that can then go into some heavy stress times in your life. It brings that stress home. It brings that stress in your environment. You become a little bit edgier. You become a little bit stroppy. You become a little bit to the point where you're not really approachable. When suddenly someone's not approachable, they become very ineffective as a boss, as a business owner, as a manager, all that. The problem with being a pushover too is that it tends to damage your relationships, not necessarily because you react in a bad way, but it could be just because if you've got a relationship with the person who's pushing you over, let's just say it's a business partner who's also a family member, you're very afraid of damaging the relationship you have with the family through that particular person. So what you do, you start to resent and you start to bubble with resentment under the surface, and it's not getting let out in any way. There's nothing moving forward because all you keep doing is backing off all the time. This then damages your relationship with that person, but then potentially damages the relationship with all the people they're connected to that you're also connected to. Suddenly it feels like you cannot even be seen in the same room as that person. You cannot bear to be seeing anybody that they're connected with, because all it does is it reminds you of what a failure you were. It can lead to, and this is often in men as a generalization, is overcompensation. So if we're failing to be strong and decisive and being able to confront and be open in our work environment, in our business environment, suddenly we then overcompensate by taking control of other areas of our lives. You'll see this quite often in men who overdo it at the gym, men who overdo it with buying fast cars, men who overdo it by suddenly divorcing their wife of 20 years and getting an 18-year-old girlfriend. That's that overcompensation where they cannot get control in this one area of their life, so they'll often go and get control in other areas of their life to compensate for that loss of control. Now you can see obviously why this could be a problem in your business, that if you're really ineffective in your business and then you're getting yourself in debt to go and buy expensive holidays and expensive toys and all that sort of thing, or you're splashing money about everywhere, it could be a problem. And also the other problem with being a pushover is that it tends to bubble over into aggression elsewhere. So when I was saying about the whole idea that you've got that resentment that starts to build when you're a bit of a pushover and it damages relationships, it can damage your relationships at home too. Quite often, people who feel ineffective in their workplaces go home and they can be quite aggressive and abusive partners as well at home. So the examples here, obviously the big spender just bought the big Porsche, and you're thinking, how in the hell is he able to afford that? He can't really, but he's feeling really, really bad at work, so he wants to feel better when he's driving. It feels like he's in control of a beast of a machine. The abuser is someone who is abusing people in their life, whether it's family at home or friends or even elsewhere in their life. That's the person who is typically overcompensating for the lack of power they feel in their life now and making up for it by taking control over other people in life elsewhere. A really sad fact that they would take that they will avoid confrontation so much in their business, but the people who are the most important people in their lives, the people who are the most affected by their every decision, are the people that they actually go and take that home to. And that's a unisex problem. That happens across all genders, all orientations, all cultures even. And then there's the resenter. That's that person who, you become that business owner who becomes very jaded and resents everything. Every time someone wins an award, oh yeah, I guess it was their turn. Every time that someone succeeds, it's like, hey, I wonder who they had to kiss up to get that. Every time someone has, starts to grow their business, they're like, yeah, I wonder who they had to pay off to do that. They resent the success of other people because they feel like they've got no success of their own. They resent the forward motion of other businesses because they don't have any forward motion in their own business. So that's a very powerful, powerful truth. When you're looking at the problem with being a pushover, it's not that you just sit there and go, oh, well, I'm weak. No, it turns people into monsters without them even realizing they're becoming it, because they go, well, I'm such a passive, nice guy. But underneath the surface, they'll say that person who's abusing their kids and their wife at home, they could be like secretly just spending themselves into oblivion with high debt and causing much greater problems down the track. So what we're going to do to help overcome some of these things, so understanding why being a pushover is such a bad thing for us, when we go in and go, well, let's have a list now of what are the things that we're going to gain from moving forward, speaking up, being honest and being authentic. I went through a personal development program. Was the beginning of 2020, beginning of last year actually. And so the end of 2019, early 2020, I finished it off, and it was all very much about being authentic and understanding that you need to confront a lot of things in yourself. That word again, confrontation. And the first part of the course was very much about confronting things in yourself. The second part was learning to confront the world that you're operating in, so that you can actually not just have a great life for yourself, but actually make the world a better place as well. And that was quite confrontational for me, in that overcoming things to be better at myself and being able to operate better in the world as myself would also actually make the world a better place for a lot of other people too. So if we list these things by speaking up, so what are we going to gain? Is it going to be better, more authentic relationships with the people we work with? Is it better productivity? We look at some examples. So for instance, productivity could be the most important thing. If you're learning to confront, if you're learning to nip problems in the bud before they become major issues, then you're naturally going to have a more productive business, a more successful business that moves more clearly through the workflow of selling a product to delivering a product, or whatever it is your business happens to do. Confrontation also helps over the mid to long term for you to have much better relationships with the people you're actually confronting. When you confront people with authenticity and honesty, there's no reason for them not to respect you more. If someone is not going to respect you more after a very good confrontation, which is very affirming for not just you, but for them as well and for the business, then they respect what your boundaries are. They respect what your expectations are. They respect what your vision for your business is. And therefore they can align themselves with that or walk away. You've got the opportunity. Anyone can leave you at any time. You're not holding anyone hostage here. So when they have a respect for you, they may respect you enough to leave because they don't think they're going to fit into your world and your vision anymore. Or they respect you enough to go, you know what? I've kind of stuffed that up. It's time for me to correct my course and do the right thing. It also helps you to have clear boundaries. So when you have good, healthy, very affirming confrontation, then boundaries are set in place. And you go, this particular behavior is not to be tolerated in this workplace, or this particular method of delivery is not to be tolerated for my business, or paying this late after the invoice is not acceptable, then you've laid down what the expectations are, and that opens the road to negotiation. So confrontation isn't necessarily the Sun Tzu art of war thing. It's not the Donald Trump art of the deal thing where you're just walking all over people and taking advantage of their weaknesses. What you're doing is you're laying out boundaries. Yes, okay, I understand that you cannot that next day delivery is not possible, but at the same time, I have to then deliver onto my clients what you're delivering to me. So what is the best you can do? 2-day delivery, that's great. I can set that clear boundary and that clear expectation in place to know that then it's going to take 4 days to get to my client. If I can let them know and know all the time that it'll be 4 days reliably rather than 2 days sometimes, but not all the time, then we have a clear boundary and we've now negotiated something really valuable because somebody at some point decided to confront a problem. You may also need to reconsider your assumptions when you go into some situations where there's confrontation is. And this is your assumptions about what confrontation actually is. And knowing that your confrontations, your assumptions about confrontation are healthy or unhealthy or helpful, or just a plain assumption that you don't even know where it came from. So quite often, when you're the person who had the, let's just say, the diplomat child, you're the child who was taught to use their words in every situation and to always let people walk all over them and to always be polite and friendly and share everything you have. That you've taken that to such an extreme that you let people walk all over you. Then the assumption you have about confrontation is that it's actually a very unhealthy, horrible thing where you're just going to walk in and people are going to walk all over you because that's what you were taught about the way the world was. So let's look at a few examples with that. It's like you're going into a confrontation asking, who do I think I am? Well, I'll tell you who you are. You're the owner of the business. So you are the boss. It all stops with you. So that's who you are. You go in with an assumption that confrontation is messy. In very few cases in my entire career and life as a business owner or as an employee or as a manager, I've very rarely seen that confrontation got truly messy. Usually what had happened is that you get to the confrontation with, say, an employee who's not performing. They would either accept that they weren't performing and do better, and in most cases that was what happened, or they just go, you know what, I won't be able to reach this, I'm going to quit. And then they leave. And that's not messy at all. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't horrible. Like a lot of like things like, oh, but what about, what about came up. But the truth was that it wasn't messy. It was actually a remarkably efficient way to deal with things. So we talked about often like we hear words such, oh, change is messy, confrontation is messy. It actually, most cases, isn't. Change can be messy for some people, for a lot of people. It's change because it's better what's coming. In the case of confrontation, it's only messy when it's approached with the attitude that is going to be messy, and therefore it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy that you go into this confrontation and yeah, it becomes messy because number one, you went in with the expectation it will be, and then that's then flowed out into the conversation you're having with the other person who also goes, yeah, this is really messy, this is horrible, this is not working well at all for anybody. Now, address one issue at a time. That's really important because you start with one small issue first. You get to assess what their response is going to be. That allows you to move on to the bigger issues once you have that understanding of what their responses are going to be. So if their responses are going to be aggressive, you know, okay, we're headed for a bit of something that's going to have to be it's going to mean I'm going to have to be a bit more on my guard. But if it's quite a measured, rational response, you go, okay, I can take this to another level and introduce a bigger issue now, because it looks like this person's not going to be aggressive. They're actually going to respond and be quite reasonable and quite human about this. So examples would be where you're dealing with the conspiracy theorists. So for instance, if you're going in and you're addressing the issue that this person is a conspiracy theorist and they're causing problems and disruptions in the workplace, well, then you would not start with the conspiracy theories being the problem. You would start with, look, I've just noticed that that there's been a little bit of difficulty with others in the workplace and yourself, and I was wondering what that might be about and what's going on there. So you start with, you know, the small issue of that there seems to be some tension before you actually start going, look, mate, you're an anti-vaxxer and you're starting to get really, really loud in this workplace. You've got no proof to give of anything like this, and you're not a scientist. You're just someone who watches a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of Sky News Channel Australia and Andrew Bolt. So can you just pull back a little bit? And so you go for the smaller issue first before you go for the big issue that you're trying to attack. The woke bro, I like to call them as the guy who is like, yeah, I'm a feminist. They got the man bun. Like, that's very, very generalized, sorry. But they tend to be like the hipster guys, the millennial guy who feels like he's very woke and very awake to the world, describes himself as a feminist, but his behavior doesn't match that. So they've got these words they put out there and this identity they put out there, but the actions of what they do don't match that at all. It's kind of massive mismatch. So instead of going, dude, you're a hypocrite and you're treating women like crap in the workplace, you would instead approach him and just go, right, so from what I can hear, there's a few issues with the way that your management style is being carried out. So I just want to know what's going on there and how that's working for you, rather than going, dude, you're a hypocrite. And then there's a guy who's caught in the act, and this is currently the person who's probably most likely to be that little bit more aggressive. The caught in the act person is the person who knows that they've done the wrong thing. They've been caught out for doing the wrong thing. Everyone knows that they're doing the wrong thing, but nobody seems to be able to get through to them in such a way that they can tell that they are doing the wrong thing and do something about it to get like some kind of decent outcome from this situation. This person will tend to be quite defeated to their or they could come across as quite defeated, I guess, that they didn't really expect to get caught and then they did. Or they could be the person who you're looking at who's getting to the point of being a little bit more, well, maybe not, probably not aggressive, but more a case of that either they're defeated, so they know that they've been caught, or this is the person who is going to then go through a series of justifications for why they did what they're did, and why that's a big issue for them. So the caught in the act person could be someone who you're looking at in an example where you don't address the issue that they're caught in the act. You just say something like, it feels like you've struggled at work lately. What do you think that's over? And let them start on something big. So you start on that small thing and then you work your way up. Sticking to what I call I statements is a way of then steering away. And I did a lot of this in those examples I was just giving you. The I statements are less about, they come across as less accusatory and they help things to stay calm. They describe a situation objectively. So they describe what's actually going on as opposed to the emotion. So you're taking the emotion out by removing the word you. You did this, you did that. So you stick the I think, and then it takes the pressure off that person feeling like they're being accused. So the examples would be, you are so arrogant in meetings. Instead, you'd say something like, I'm concerned about the way others are dressed in meetings. So you're not necessarily definitely put it to them, and they'll come back and say, they'll usually put two and two together and work it out for themselves. But because you've come across in a very non-accusatory way, they will come back to you most of the time in a really good, solid, professional way. Another thing is, you are coming into work looking like you haven't slept. Rather, you could say, I see a pattern of behavior developing that doesn't look very healthy. So rather than saying you look like crap and you're coming in tired and you're not working well and you need to up your game, you're just saying, look, there's a pattern of behavior that seems to be developing that doesn't look like it's doing very well. So you're taking away the emotion and the power of it, and you're just saying, here's a thing that's just a fact. We don't know that that person hasn't slept. We don't know that that person is intentionally arrogant in meetings. We just know that there's a concern about the way people are being addressed in meetings, and we can see that there is a pattern of behavior that appears to be developing for this employee that doesn't appear to be healthy. Now, of course, moving forward, just about always has to be done in small steps. We've got to understand that this whole confrontation thing is an art, not a science. It's got certain principles that help you in psychology, but overall, you're just going to have to feel your way most of the time. So do know and understand it won't always go well, and allow yourself time to practice and improve. My very first confrontation was when I was a manager and I had an employee who was very aggressive and very non-cooperative and always speaking behind the backs, and also was like speaking horrible things about me behind my back that I heard about and I did nothing about. So finally, when I came to that confrontation, I didn't handle it well. I didn't use I statements. I used you statements. Adam, I know you've been talking about behind my back. I know you said to Carly this, this, and this. I know you said to Laurie this, this, and this. And so he immediately flew off the handle, and it got really, really not messy. It just got very, very aggressive, and he started throwing ideas at me. That ways that I could have been a better manager, which some of them are actually very good points, but they were delivered in such a way that he was someone who completely, I'd lost all my trust, and it was a very negative influence in that team. And he chose to go of his own volition and own accord, mostly because I think that caught in the act thing, he'd been caught in the act. So whilst that happened very relatively unavoidably, we still live in the same town, and he absolutely hates me. Like, to the point where if he sees me walking down the street, he will literally cross the road to avoid me, and it's a horrible situation to be in when you don't live in a very particularly big city, because you run into each other a lot and you know a lot of very similar people. You know, you walk in some of the same circles, and that's a horrible thing to go through. So how do we prepare for this constructive confrontation? We do it by asking why, and that's in why are we having this conversation and what do we hope to achieve? This is the why are we here right now? What are we actually trying to get out of this? And understanding whether your motivation is to support the other person or whether your motivation is to punish the other person. So when it comes down to confronting a supplier, are you looking to punish them and say, look, until you get this right, I'm not paying that invoice? Or are you saying something more like, look, I understand that you're under a lot of pressure at the moment, so I want to know what I can do to help take that pressure off, if that's your particular goal. So understand why you're going into it, because that creates the whole context for what you're going to be doing in that room. Then understand the what, and that's the what are my assumptions about the other person's goal for this conversation. So you know why you may be going in, but you now need to understand what your pre-assumptions are for why the other person's coming into it. So if you're looking to punish, are they coming in there to look to avoid being punished, or are they coming in there to, to transfer their punishment onto you, or is it something else that they're coming with? Do you understand what their goals might be coming into it as well? Then ask yourself, am I actually emotionally prepared for this meeting? Am I ready? And a lot of the time you won't be ready. What feelings are being triggered by this situation? How does your history, your background, your upbringing, the way you've handled confrontation in the past, how does it explain what those triggers are? Are they triggers that are just naturally just going off? And can you overcome those triggers to be much more emotionally calm when you're walking into the situation? Also, what's your attitude? What is your attitude about the impending conversation? And how is that influencing your approach to it? If you're walking with an attitude of this is going to be messy, then there's a very good chance that this thing's going to get real messy real quick. If you're going with the attitude of I think this is solvable, then you're going in with the whole attitude and then a set of behaviors that support the goal of overcoming the problem. Then can you focus on good that can come from this rather than worrying about the negative? When you go and think it's going to be a mess, it's going to be horrible, then it's just funny how that's a self-fulfilling prophecy that things, funnily enough, do indeed get worse. And so focusing on the good that can come out of it can really turn around your attitude and get a better result. And then understand, what do you know about the other person? What is the context of their life? What are their hopes and dreams and wants and needs and fears? How can you line this person up in your head to let them know that if you're trying to overcome this situation, get onto a really good future with them, then what is it that you can pull out that you know about them that helps you to see them not just as an employee who's gone awry, but also as a human being that you want to have an ongoing relationship that's successful with. Once you've got that in there, then they become less of an adversary and more of a partner for moving forward. That's, of course, if this is not a person who's gone too far and you need to get rid of them. And what are your fears? What are your fears going into this situation? And do you and that other person have common fears? When you find common ground, even if those things are fears, things you're both afraid of, even admitting when I went into my most recent confrontation saying, look, I really hate confrontation. I just don't really do it very well. And they're like, I know I'm the same. We could have probably avoided this if we had just spoken a bit sooner, hey? And then we did. And then we actually had an authentic conversation. And my goodness, it helped us to become much better oriented towards each other as people who work in a very similar field. It made a huge difference. And we could have avoided all that negativity and all that fear by simply owning up to that much, much earlier in the game in our relationship. It's also a two-way street. So you've got to understand, are there things that you've done that contributed to the problem that's occurring right now? And understanding too, not just throwing it back on yourself and saying, yeah, I might have contributed to that. Also understanding what their level of contribution to this is. If you can come into a conversation and a confrontation saying, you know what, I did this and I can see how that might have caused that. And then you can very honestly say, but at the same time, you did this and it caused that. It's exacerbated everything. Then you're going in with the spirit of reconciliation, not with the spirit of division. When you're going in with the reconciliation, you're going, I stuffed up with this. I take ownership of that, right? I'm going to own that and I'm apologizing for that. I'm sorry that that happened. And then that lines them up to say, you know what, I've done this. It just it's amazing how people will come to that same level. You come in at this level, they'll want to come in and reach up to that level with you. But if you dig down to that level, they'll want to dig down to that level with you too, and fight it out in the gutter. So when is it not right to confront? I would say, first of all, when you're not prepared, when you are nowhere near prepared for the conversation and the confrontation, do not confront. Delay it until such time that you are ready for the confrontation, when you've got the right data, the right information, and the right attitude. When emotions are too hot and you're not going to get a rational discussion out of this, abort. You just do not have the emotional capacity to overcome this, so just don't do it. When you've not allowed enough time, if you've allowed yourself 15 minutes for a conversation that honestly needs an hour and a half, then you're not doing yourself or that person any favors by trying to rush it in there. You're not going to cover the situation well enough. And there's sometimes when the battle just isn't worth it. Sometimes, and I know one of my previous employers used to speak this way about staff that were just so wrong that it was actually better off not confronting, because they'd hang themselves. And just about in every situation that person did, they just seemed to understand when those people just weren't really to be bothered with. They were just too much, too hard. And then, of course, this needs a mediator. The two participants can't solve, like you and they are at such a point where you cannot solve this problem between you. You need someone to come in as someone who's going to have much more experience of the mediation, remove the emotion out of it, and actually get down to the actual issues at hand and overcome that problem. So mediators are very, very good at this kind of thing, and it's not government mediators. You go to all sorts of mediators who are very experienced in this. Calling in a mediator is not a failure. It's actually you going, look, I understand there's too many emotions, there's not enough time here. We need to really get someone who's going to cut down the issues and really help us to overcome this together. So, are you ready to go deeper? Are you ready to become better at this stuff? Well, what's next is the ability for you to take on a consult with the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions Program. If you've never had a consult or a free workshop before, not including these free webinars, they're always free. But if you have that first consult, you get it for free. Second consult, $44, and the third is $66. Now, I'm not a mediator. I'm certainly not a trainer of such things as mediation, but I've come across plenty of my own issues with confrontation before and had to overcome them. And it took me quite a lot of personal development in my case to get to that point. But we have other advisors who are very, very good at this kind of thing, whether it's confrontation with employees, confrontation with suppliers, or confrontation with pretty much anyone in your life when it comes to your business. So you can go to asbas.com.au to find out more about that, and you can register for your free one-to-one with myself or one of the many other amazing advisors on there. And if you like, you feel free to reach out to me through my email address that's on screen right now. You can also go through Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram and stalk me on over there. I'm usually pretty responsive on LinkedIn in particular. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really fun kind of getting an exploration of what confrontation is and what we might be afraid of when it comes to it. And when it comes down to confrontation, I would say nip it in the bud now. It's only going to get worse if you don't do anything about it down the track. I'm Dante St James. I'll see you in the next one.